Hello and welcome to today's video review. We are continuing our series on Star Wars, moving into The Rise of Skywalker. Today we are going to be talking about Episode 2, Attack of the Clones, which released on May 16th, 2002, and as of this recording has a Rotten Tomato scores of 65% out of 250 reviews. I, of course, am Mr. Nose, and we are joined once again today by Andrew. And what are your overall thoughts on, this film?
Well, when it came out in theaters, loved it. Thought it was awesome. It was brilliant. Of course, I was a teenager, and then I got older, watched it a few times more. And while it serves a pivotal role in the storyline, I think most of the problems were with writing and technical, development.
Okay. I actually remember that. I didn't know you at the time. I was still in high school. But I did go to a midnight reviewing, and I thought it was great. But I didn't realize that it took the whole film to lead up to the last 20 minutes. And I realized it in a couple more viewings that it really doesn't pick up until right around the time that Obi-Wan is investigating on not Geonosis but Kamino and following Jango Fett. But if I didn't say this before, we are going to go into a very deep dive and spoil most of the plot. My bad for waiting so long.
But if you haven't seen it before, however unlikely, just don't watch.
It has been, let's see, it's at 2002. It's now 17 years. So, probably see it at least once.
Unless you're 8.
Alright, I'll give you that. But it's got, like The Phantom Menace, its main issues are, sorry George, directing and writing.
Yeah.
He's got good actors. Hayden Christensen proved himself before Attack of the Clones with, I think it was called My Life is a House.
So I thought that came after.
Well,
but good movie. I have seen it.
Well, if I remember right, that movie he was nominated for Best Supporting Actor from the Screen Actors Guild and the Golden Globes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, they tied him in with Kevin Kline. You can't. With someone leading you like that, you can't fail.
If you have a director that's an actor's director, somebody like the Russos, Steven Spielberg, that can get a good performance out of their actors.
Nolan.
Christopher Nolan, yep. I mean, you have an Academy Award-winning actress. Sure, it'd be a while later with Black Swan, but Natalie Portman feels wooden and like she doesn't even believe she doesn't even believe what she's saying.
Her acting almost feels like what you would see on a stage, because you have to project more. She tries too hard. She, like the very first scene with her walking in to the meeting between Palpatine and the Jedi Council. The whole sequence right there, there was really no real emotion in her voice.
And
it was like she was reading a line and trying to, this is drama.
And the way they film it is like this is essentially the same day as her arriving on Coruscant, and she just lost a handmaiden.
Mm-hmm.
There should be emotion there. Yeah. She should be emotional over the death of not just a guardian, but a friend.
Yeah, it was kind of like she could have done just as well walking in and going, "What happened? I don't know what's going on."
Yeah.
So,
and it's not just her. Even Ewan McGregor, and he's the highlight of the film. But he says, "My young apprentice," 15 times?
To give it that, I would have to say that his acting picked up midway through the movie. And it's not really his acting. I still have to say I think this is more for the writing and directing. In the simple sense of, early on in the movie, you watch him, and it's like he's trying way too hard to pull off Alec Guinness's Obi-Wan. I mean, the one point where he goes, "This weapon is your life," I just sit there and just go, "Oh my god." But it's almost like they didn't really get into the feel of it until probably, like you said, Geonosis. There was, what was it? Sorry, I have brain farts. There's this sequence between it where it's like they're trying to force too much into it. I mean, we have the sequence where Anakin finally meets Padme for the first time, and we're going to cover that a little bit later. But they're literally sitting and meeting and discussing how we're going to be your bodyguards, and they get into a full-fledged argument about who's the master and who's the apprentice.
And they can't...
Right in front of everyone, and you just see her starfighter pilot guy. I can't think of his name.
That's Captain Typho?
Typho.
Yeah.
He's standing in the background, and you just see this look on his face like awkward.
Yeah, that scene, like, I understand that scene. That scene is meant to convey that Anakin thinks he's more than what he is. Mm-hmm. And it's just...
He's prideful, arrogant,
egotistical. And it just seems too much
We have to tie in that he is the typical teenager.
And he's 20 at this point, roughly, I think. 1920, based on his...
He was supposed to be, what?
9 or 10.
And it was, I believe, 17 years later.
This is 10 years later.
Is it 10 years?
It's 10 years. Yep.
Yeah. It was longer than that.
Nope.
Okay. So, yeah, I mean, he's 1920 now. And
yeah, so... okay. This is gonna... I'm gonna get some hate for this. He's the typical, stereotypical millennial.
Yeah. He's the millennial before a millennial.
Yeah, because like he thinks that he's
special.
Well, he is, but it's all gone to his head, and he thinks that everything should be given to him, which we see more in the next episode when he gets added to the council but denied the rank of master.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Of course. Yeah. There's definitely a discussion point a little bit later in that regard.
But if we're looking at Anakin and Padme together, this is meant to be a romance story, I guess.
It's a romance story where when you've seen the film at least twice after that, you typically just skip to the next chapter anytime Anakin and Padme are together.
He comes off as creepy. He does.
Yeah, he's the typical, I'm going to stand here and leer at you in this, what I assume is a desultory way. And you're just going to go, as Padme puts it, it makes me uncomfortable. Yeah. He is nowadays would be basically part of the Me Too movement as he's disgusting.
Goodness.
Oh, come on. He'd end up in the Coruscant Times.
Oh, well, that probably would be true. But he just... His lines about sand. This is the film where he goes on about sand. It's coarse, it's grainy, and it gets everywhere. He can't even deliver that with any kind of conviction. And I don't think that's him. I think that's George just saying, good. What was that famous line? Harder, faster, more, or something? I don't remember that story, but there's a story about that. That's all he used to say on set. But
it's more like, let's film this, get through it. I want you to read the lines that I wrote you, and as soon as you're done, it's golden.
Yeah,
because I'm George Lucas.
And it's between Anakin, like, if you're Padme, how do you fall in love with a guy that says, my mom just died in my arms, so I murdered a whole village for it? The whole village. Women, children, they're all dead.
Well, yeah. In some ways, I'm going back to the bad writing there because I made a point while we were watching it. Woman survives month in captivity, has some cuts on her face and bruising and such, but the moment her long-lost son shows up, she just happens to die in his arms.
Well, here's okay. Maybe I can tie something in that I'm thinking about. Yoda has this innate ability to focus on Anakin at any time, no matter where he's at. He feels the destruction, essentially, of the Tusken Raider village. He feels Anakin getting beaten up by Dooku. So, what if, because there's that whole theory about Palpatine and his master using the midichlorians to create Anakin. What if that's true, and Palpatine is actually forcefully, through the Force, keeping Shmi alive just long enough for Anakin to find her?
Well, yeah, I mean, Anakin would have told him of his dreams of his mom. I think,
and he did. They make a comment of it, yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, it's entirely possible. I mean, you got the old expanded universe. Yeah, it's obsolete. Some of it, all of it, bits and pieces. You can never really tell.
There's truth in legends.
But
what's the tagline?
I mean, it's like, if you look at it, if you go by that Palpatine and his master attempted to, create life out of it. Well, in some ways, you almost got to say that he's looking at dear old dad.
Well, if I remember right, in the Legends continuity, I don't remember if they failed or succeeded, but it was the Force itself that created Anakin because of their tampering with the midichlorians.
Actually, I remember that more or less quite well. What it was Palpatine and him attempted to do this experiment, and Palpatine could feel somewhere far out in the galaxy the Force shift. Okay. It was kind of like they were trying to do it on their test subject, but it ricocheted and just shot off, and in the end they inadvertently created Anakin on Tatooine instead of where they were actually working.
Oh, okay.
Kind of like one of those things of, I don't know how to quite describe it. By manipulating the Force isn't going to do exactly what they want, and instead it just hop-skipped.
Oh, okay.
So, I mean, it's one of those things of, the question comes then to the whole prophecy deal. Does that make that null and void? Or does he sit with the Sith prophecy or the Jedi prophecy now?
And as Yoda, I believe, says in 3, it was Yoda or Mace Windu, the prophecy misread maybe.
Mm-hmm.
So, but that goes back in, if you read the canon book Master and Apprentice, Qui-Gon, it goes more into the prophecy, actually more than just the prophecy of the one to bring balance, but Qui-Gon's really into the prophecies, and I think we'll talk a little bit more about this with episode 3, but I wonder if Qui-Gon would have survived, how he would have trained Anakin, or how Anakin would have been different. But I think that's more of a episode 3 section because of Anakin's true fall.
I do want to go back to that thing with Yoda, though. The simple sense of, to me, it's a major plot hole. Because you have Yoda, who is almost practically stalking Anakin through the Force throughout 2 and even 3 a bit.
I wonder if he did it between 1 and 2 as well.
I'm curious as to, you feel this intense sadness, anger, and hatred, and then you hear Qui-Gon yelling Anakin and telling him to stop, and yet, they come back and the whole Battle of Geonosis just put it out of everyone's mind that Anakin went off the deep end? I mean, back in the day, that was, oh yeah, you're getting on that ship, we're sending you into space to somewhere nobody knows where you're going, and we're never going to see you again. I mean, well, that led to the creation of the Sith, but I mean, the point was, you're no longer part of our order.
Yep.
I mean, what he did right there literally is expulsion. And yet, for some reason, Master Yoda, the wisest master of the Jedi Order, the Grand Master, just kind of goes, Mace, he's very sad, and that's it.
Well,
and then later, Yoda senses him and Anakin arguing on the gunship.
I think Yoda's scared of Anakin. Mm-hmm. In a not just, he thinks that if he forces him away, at least this is my assumption, that if he forces him away, he's going to come back stronger and more hateful and able to completely tear apart the Order.
Or it's a reverse psychology aspect of, if I try to be hard on him or punish him or do this, we're going to lose the prophecy, and I'm going to push him further away.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one of those things of, in the end, as Yoda put it later on, Yoda should have been the one training him. I think we brought that up in the first episode review, is you're going to take this kid who has more midichlorians than any Jedi living in history, who's got a dark path ahead, and you're going to give him to a brand new Jedi Knight who just passed his trials.
Only because his master thought it was a good idea.
Yeah. No, somebody on the council should have been training him.
Yep.
Yoda specifically.
No, I actually think Mace would have been a better teacher for him.
Yeah,
than
Mace
Yoda.
would have been able to curb his anger.
Because that's the whole point of the purple lightsaber, is when he imprinted on when in canon, let me see if I remember this right. In canon, the lightsaber crystal is essentially colorless. You imprint on it your emotions, and that is where your kind of guide is. Blue is typically more of the cosmic force.
Well,
and green's more living force, and then the purple is more of a dark side, light side mix. If I understand what I remember correctly.
See, I'd say it's just an imprint of your personality. You know, I mean,
it's explained somewhere. I don't remember where.
Part of the problem is you got new canon versus old canon,
and I could very well be mixing it together.
Yeah,
well, actually, old canon. Because old canon, you could just find a color of a crystal, like KOTOR, where you could have yellow or pink or.
Yeah, you had a color crystal, and then you had I believe there was Kyber, then there was another type. I don't remember the names. There were different crystals you could use. Mm-hmm. Now, new canon, it's Kyber crystal. They're a living crystal attuned to the Force, and basically, when you took it, the stone would attune itself to you and turn green or blue or whatever color. I don't think it's locked specifically to green or blue or even purple. There's other colors.
There is
we've seen.
Yellow in the Clone Wars cartoon.
But from what I read up on it, because I got curious because I wanted to try and get an understanding of the whole Kyber thing now with the new canon, and all the explanations to that.
Death Star main weapon, giant Kyber.
Well, it's basically lightsaber.
Yeah.
Basically, the only reason it used to be that the red lightsabers had to be artificial.
Yep. And now you make them
green. Basically you're subjugating them to your will instead of attuning them. But if I remember right, there was one instance mentioned in which there was a Kyber crystal that turned red of its own accord and attuned with the person using it. But I don't remember who that was supposed to be.
That one I hadn't heard of.
The main thing is if you go by the old canon, people who wielded blue lightsabers were typically the Sentinels. They were the ones who security. They went out, they fought the battles that needed to be fighting, dealt with the problems, protected the Jedi Order.
Green was consuls.
Green was consuls. Right? Yeah. And they were the ones who basically were the wise, the mediators, diplomats.
Okay.
Nowadays, I'd say it's more probably based. Well. Unless we go back to the generic lightsaber of the 3 trilogies, in which here's a lightsaber, it's green. Oh, here's one that's blue. I remember the ones they just throw out to everybody.
Yeah. At the very end in the battle where they were just blue or green, or Mace Windu, the one alone with the purple.
Yeah, that one was they kind of just. We're not going to worry about the whole lightsaber mechanics here. It's just more a matter of. We travel with a box full of extra lightsabers. Here you go.
Yeah. That battle was fun, though. Mm-hmm. I mean, that battle alone, we're seeing 50, 75 Jedi, ballpark. I'm not going to pause it, count them.
Get whittled down to like 10?
Well, no, but that scene alone makes me want a large-scale Jedi battle. Think Game of Thrones, like the Battle of the Bastards, with lightsabers.
Hey, we might be getting that.
And
With the
Benioff and
films that
Weiss
they're talking
might
about.
be doing that.
Yeah, I'd be fine with that. Oh.
Yeah, well, we won't get into their writing. But the way that starts with Obi-Wan's interaction with Dooku, seeing Ewan McGregor work off of Christopher Lee, probably the best scene in the film. Definitely one of the two. The other one being McGregor and Tamara Morrison on Camino.
Yeah.
Just those two dialogue scenes.
Yeah.
Definitely the best.
That's about where the acting level picked up for him.
Maybe not necessarily best written, but definitely best acted.
He pulled it off. It's more like he took generic, like, tasteless items and cooked them up in the kitchen, at least came up with something edible.
Yeah.
I mean, going into the battle thing, I gotta talk on CGI.
Okay.
The problem I find most with 2 and going into 3, and I'm not going to really discount 3 in regards to CGI because there was a lot of it that was awesome, but we'll go there later. In 2, I think they did it too soon. I think he went from, hey, we have this new technology where we can do everything digital now. If I remember right, there was an interview, he pretty much said that.
Well, every single clone trooper is digital.
Every single clone trooper, pretty much every single set area is digital. I mean, that first meeting where they're in Palpatine's office, I'm sitting there looking at it, there's no sense of depth. You see the wall behind, that curves because he's got the circular room.
But once you get to those windows,
I'm just going, I see the wall in the background of everything, and I'm just going, there's no depth, and it looks like it's just artificial. I mean...
Now that, to me, that's the green screen line. And I could always see the green screen line throughout. Like, there was one scene with Zam Weasel. At least I think that's how it's pronounced. It might be Wezzel. But her, who I absolutely love that character. I want to see more out of her. It makes me want to see more of the underground. But her and Django, they're walking along some side corridor, and the depth is really far off. So you can see that, like, the left side of the screen, while graphically beautiful, feels out of place because of that CGI line.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's that. Then there's several instances in which the people just didn't match up. You got the scene leading up to the Battle of Geonosis. You have Mace Windu. They show from waist down, walking down this hallway, and his feet just don't even look like they're touching the floor. You got another sequence, you see a guy get blown up at the very beginning of the movie and thrown off a ramp, and when he lands, he's about a foot off the ground.
Yep.
I mean, my main thing was what made me love and still appreciate Episode 1, and my love for the 3 films and the new ones.
Oh yeah, they did.
Model work.
Yep, they did do
live
model work,
locations. I mean, you could have done set pieces with green screen backgrounds. But the problem is Lucas decided on this one that he went in and pretty much everything was done, except for a few specific areas, was all done CGI. It was all green screen, and I think, and I'm pretty sure I've even seen videos where people say this, is the actors were not comfortable because it was a brand new way of shooting film.
They didn't know how to do it,
that's part of
and
what took away from the movie.
Very well could be, because you can see it. It's like they didn't know how to. It's like you put someone in a green room and say, act. And this being one of the first films to do that was rough. Now, I'm not saying the film isn't graphically beautiful. The scenes are. It just, there is a lack of, I want to say realism, because I don't feel like those actors are really there.
Well, even the clone troops, you can't connect to it.
Like when they're walking up the ships in Coruscant, which I don't know why you would land a Venator class Star Destroyer on that planet anyway. But when they're marching up, they look rubbery and not like they're wearing plastoid armor. It's all looks rubbery.
Well, death sequences. Guy gets blown up, and when he lands, he just kind of bounces. You see that a lot with the Geonosians too. They just kind of bounce. There's no real fluidity to them.
Yeah, because they were all CGI too.
Yep.
And that, speaking of Geonosians, that was a major problem with Pagal the Lesser, the leader. He just, they would look at him and talk, but you could tell they're looking like through him because they don't see him.
Mm-hmm.
But that we've been talking all negative. There are some good things in this movie. It's the low end of the total, but it's not the worst. It's not the worst.
Yeah,
we'll get to that. That's later. But sound design. Listening to the tremor charges, or seismic charges, I believe they actually call them. But the three animals in the arena before the Jedi show up. The sound design. Who was it that did it? Brad Bird? No.
I'm not that in depth on that.
I don't remember who was the sound mixer and sound designer.
Well, you got to remember though, THX has been leading in terms of audio since
decades.
It was created. And that's just it. That moment was the moment that kind of picked up in terms of the action on it. Is you got these basically just silence and then just boom. And
I'll never forget that feeling because in the theater I was kind of bored, but all of a sudden that seismic charge went off and I went, ooh. It's where the movie picks up, and really it's that sound cue. The music, John Williams' music through here is great, but it's that seismic charge going off that really picks it up.
Mm-hmm. Jedi Starfighter.
Yeah, you wanted to talk about the starship.
Hey, it's the same sequence. It makes zero sense to have a fighter that you have to have a hyperdrive collar on. I mean, what's the point? And then an entire combat sequence, and then when he lands, you see laser ports on the front end.
Well, Obi-Wan is not a pilot. He stresses in this sequence, and this is why I hate.
He hates machines in general. Heck, the amount of insults he gives to droids. But I digress.
I actually want to see now if he makes any insults to C-3PO in Episode 4.
He does to R2.
The only thing I remember Alec Guinness giving a line about was, "I don't ever seem to remember what
I was
you're
talking
doing."
about Episode 3.
I'm talking like Sir Alec Guinness.
We'll talk that. There's more to that one I want to discuss when we get there.
But Obi-Wan through this, I don't think much. Never thought much of it because he's trying to take Jango alive. Mm-hmm. So I never thought much about him not shooting the cannons. So,
well, kind of the downside to it though was some of the media, I think, after the film, whether it was books or things like that, made out because of the impression you get in the movie. You get this impression that the Jedi Starfighters were unarmed. This was the first time I actually noticed the laser ports, though. But the other part to that is he gets picked up, he gets detected by Slave One the moment he comes in. And yet later you see him flying over the droid command ships docked on the planet's surface and nobody even notices. So the question is is the ship stealthed and just Jango's got really good hardware, or... we're going back to Dave. We gotta go back to
this is going back into the writing, and I think we've talked enough about how we're not fans of it. But writing is actually not a bad thing here. There is a lot of politics within the prequel trilogy, but they're not executed well. But they're there, and the concept was needed.
I just feel this film, with how pivotal the politics were, and this is like the biggest part that we wanted to discuss, was Episode 1, you get the politics, you get the understanding. Palpatine's playing the role.
He's playing
maneuvering things to get into Chancellery.
Yep.
You understand that part of it. 3, you get the politics. He's basically seizing power.
Yep.
2, however, it's almost overlooked. It's there. It's right in front of your face. They have these discussions about it. But I've always felt every time I watch that movie, if I don't specifically pay attention, I miss a lot of key elements of the politics that are at play here.
Yeah, if you're just watching it in passing, all you really get out of the politics is this. There's two sequences. There's the one sequence at the beginning where Padme comes in and is basically told she's in danger. There's that, and then there's the one where Jar Jar basically ends up thinking this is what Padme would do. Let's give the Chancellor supreme power.
Yeah.
I still don't like Jar Jar.
Well, it's just
And he's a scapegoat. He turns
Yeah,
into a giant scapegoat.
the undercurrents of it are literally that, you almost miss it. Padme came to Coruscant at the beginning of the film for one specific or reason, which is to vote against a military creation act.
Yep.
Now, as the film progresses, and it gets a little murky because there's some issues with, the Sifo Dyas line and things like that. That's where it gets confusing.
Oh, the history.
But basically, as I pointed out to you, the Chancellor just can't come up with a sudden clone army and fleet and all this stuff. He's got to have the powers to do it. But this plays in later because, what is episode 3? You get the Council of 2000 or something like that, or the
the
League of
petition
2000.
of 1,000 or 2,000
Yeah.
that they almost completely cut out.
They cut, yeah. But in this film, it's one of those things of you have an entire enemy faction, pretty much, political faction, whose primary intent is, we're not happy with the Republic. We have military forces of our own. You guys know this because we invaded Naboo.
Yep.
And it's the eternal battle that you see with the Republic is you have a lot of pacifistic governments that don't want war. Why would you think that the best option here is to vote down,
Well, you're
the
right.
creation
And
of a military?
I mentioned those two scenes. There's also that scene where Dooku is bringing together the treaty.
Mm-hmm.
His preface is that the Republic is being led by an evil person, a Sith Lord,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know how much he tells the other group, but most of the other they're the business clans.
He
They're not.
played the other group. Remember, the other group was aware that his master was the Sith Lord. They know.
I think the only one
Dark
that's aware of it is because he tells, because that's how he gets the Trade Federation in, is by saying we're going after
against
the,
Darth Sidious.
Yep.
The only
And
one I know of later that knew was
Poggle
General
the Lessel.
Grievous.
Because he kept saying my master.
Well, there's Poggle, but then there's also
Grievous knew, but I'm
so
thinking
it's
that
like he's playing all sides against each other.
he is. They are, and that's how Sidious and Tyrannus, Dooku, basically control the war on every front.
Mm-hmm.
And the Jedi are too narrow-minded to see it.
I brought up earlier when we were watching it, though, I still just kind of almost wonder, it may be just, the fanboy thing in me, but it's like, you almost want to wonder if Dooku wasn't playing his own game in the simple sense of he was playing all sides in the hope of taking down Grievous.
He had to have been, without a doubt.
But I mean, it's like, you're looking at this venerable Jedi, well-respected, who suddenly is like, oh, yeah, I'll join you, sure, I'm going to leave the Order. I mean, he had his disagreements with the Order.
There's a new novel or comic out. I don't remember which, but talking about Dooku.
This was brought up in Darth Plagueis. I don't know if that's still canon.
That's not canon anymore, unfortunately.
But it's like, you look at it, it's like, what better opportunity than to basically, because at one point, for no real reason, he tells Obi-Wan, Qui-Gon would have joined me. Qui-Gon wouldn't have joined you. Well, yeah, he would, because there's a Sith Lord in control of the entire Senate.
And Qui-Gon, they bring this out more in canon recently with Master and Apprentice, is that Qui-Gon didn't follow the organization, he followed the Force.
Yeah.
So would he have joined Dooku? No, because he would have known Dooku was part of the dark side, but he would have went...
I kind of think he may have gone somewhat rogue, personally.
I think he'd have went rogue.
He'd have probably taken Anakin with him to try and hunt them down.
I think Obi-Wan would have went too.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's how it would have happened. And I wish we'd have gotten more of, well, that's between these two, the hunt for Darth Sidious within the films.
Mm-hmm.
Because at this point, no, not even at this point. It started once they figured out there was another Sith and won. that they started started hunting for Sidious.
Yeah, but the problem is that the whole time he was right in front of their face, which Yoda
He
inadvertently tells their greatest enemy that they can't, that the
Yep.
dark side's obscuring
and
their
he
view.
flaunts it. If you break down, like, look at the visual dictionary from 2 or 3, maybe even a little bit of both, his Palpatine's office is littered with Sith memorabilia. Littered.
Well, Yoda, though, would probably be about the only one who would recognize any Sith material at that point,
Well, at
outside
that
of what's
point-
in the archives.
At that point, he'd be
Of
the
course.
only one. Oh, let's not even. I don't want to get into that. Jocasta Nu in the archives is a complete
Well, if it's not there,
representation.
it doesn't exist.
Complete representation of the Jedi
The failing of the Jedi.
narrow-mindedness, and yeah.
They've reached a point in their 1,000 years of being a stable order at which basically they're so arrogant they just can't see it.
And it's that arrogance that leads them to
Mhm.
not see the clues that Dooku's the one behind everything.
I mean, they began to suspect, but the reality is you're looking at the dark side surrounds the Chancellor. He's got supreme power, has a military, yet we still can't quite figure out the fact that he's the Sith Lord.
Yep. And I mean, like with Dooku's the only one that could erase the archives. And
Yeah.
and Obi-Wan even goes to see the meeting and says, "Oh, Dooku's not the one behind it. It's the Trade Federation."
Well, it's because they had so much faith in him because he left on good terms and he was a Jedi.
Yep.
Mace Windu says it.
It's
No,
not in
he-
his character.
He's not in his character. You know, he's a political idealist, not an assassin or a terrorist, you know. And it's like, think about it. You just figured out that things have been erased from an archive that shouldn't be able to be.
That's only
And 10 years
accessible
ago,
by
You
Jedi.
have a Jedi that leaves your order and who is now at the front of a separatist government.
Political idealist.
Yeah.
According to Kai Udi Mundi.
Yeah. So,
Really,
there's
The-
a lot going on in the movie. It's just
you
lot
have
of
to
other
read through
things.
the lines
Eat
and
it.
look for it. This movie suffers from poor wooden acting that is cringeworthy, but that isn't. I don't fault that to the actors. I fault that to the writing and the directing. Sorry, George. Maybe too much. Maybe doing both wasn't doing it, but it's.
Well, the thing is, you see, anytime he gets too much of a hands-on approach, I mean, his attempts to put in humor,
Oh, jeez.
C-3PO in the Droid Factory, I mean, that's like the Jar Jar Binks of Episode 2. Yeah, we're going to have him get his head knocked off with a droid head put in, then he's going to be in another one, just to try and get some laughs. Whereas the other sequences, like,
What was that?
some rescue.
Yes.
I mean,
yeah.
those are the parts that we love out of the
That's
Star
the-
Wars films,
that's
or
the
even
Star
out of
Wars
Indiana
comedy.
Jones.
Yeah. But
George Lucas
C-3PO's
doesn't have
head
it.
getting pulled through the sand going, "Oh, this is such a drag." It's groan-worthy, not funny. Not funny.
Yeah, I'll say it was funny when I saw it in theaters. The next time I watched the movie, I really just was like, this.
Yep.
Yeah. So it's one of those things, you know, we love George Lucas for creating this universe, but in some ways I'm kind of glad he's hands off these days.
Well, when you sell it for stock. But, hey,
Yeah.
get your money, George. I won't fault you for that.
Hmm.
But really, the movie had potential. It just failed.
I think it was too soon. Not the movie itself, but the technology they used in the movie. Because honestly, I feel like the attempt to go full digital like that hamstrung it from the get-go.
Yep.
I think that, along with the writing, is what brought down the acting. But, like I say, about midway through, it gets a lot better. I mean,
But
even thinking about, as much as I hate watching Anakin and Padme together, you start seeing them start to click a little bit more together. Padme seems more comfortable with her line, you know, with her
I
acting.
mentioned this earlier from an in standpoint. How can someone fall in love with someone who just murdered an
It's
entire
creepy.
village and is creepy? But we don't have any sense of time passing. How long were they on Naboo? A week? A month? 6 months?
Mm-hmm.
We don't know. So there is a chance that she's able to overlook it because of the good faith and her thought of, oh, he was just really mad.
This is well, I think it's more looking at his history. This is a slave kid, this kid grew up in slavery. And then
Yeah.
he's taken away to become a Jedi, which is a good thing, but he loses his mother for 10 years. And
Goes back
it's
to the planet
understandable
where he
that
was a
he's
slave
just-
and then watches his mom die. Yeah.
But I mean, in real world, though,
Run, girl, run.
well, no, I was going to say, in real world, when you finally meet this guy for the first time in 10 years, and he goes, "You've grown too, more beautiful." I mean, that's like the moment of, yeah, okay. It's nice to see you again. You know?
Yeah. But
Or the, I'm going to sit and like casually rub your arm and you tell me not to.
really, though, the story was there. They could have found a way to craft it well. Just acting and
Yeah.
and writing. But
The constraints of one movie to build a love story like that, and then include galactic politics, and then include battle sequences,
yeah, you're right.
then
Yeah.
include detective work sequences.
They did too. It was ambitious and too much.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. You have to get them to fall in love, but there could have been backstory there between the two movies. It could have literally come into almost like Episode 3, where when he meets her the first time, it's still this secret. We've got this. They could have gotten together between 1 and 2.
Yeah,
And then it come into they're in a secret relationship that they're growing.
and they completely play this off as they've not saw each
Yeah.
other. But for me, this is on the low end, and it's purely on execution. It's probably not the worst, but it's pretty far down for me.
For me,
for
it's
the
probably
series.
number 2 on in a scale of from 1 to 10, 10 being the best. This one's 2.
Well, that's what we thought of Star Wars Episode 2, Attack of the Clones. What did you think? Go ahead and leave us a comment below. And if you want to see more in this series leading into the Rise of Skywalker, go ahead and hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And until next time, have a great night.